Republican presidential candidate and former New Jersey governor, Christie. It's New Jersey Day here on the lead. Let's just start with the news that was just reported. It does appear that Donald Trump is likely to be, if not he's likely to be, then he's at least preparing to be indicted by Special Counsel Jack Smith in this classified documents case. What's your reaction?
Well, look, I think that one of the biggest indications is this most recent meeting earlier in the week that his attorneys had with Jack Smith and people at DOJ.
You're a former U.S. attorney, so you know what a meeting like that would be.
Yeah, my guess is that he probably got a target letter where at the very end of an investigation, you typically go to the target, give them an opportunity to come into the grand jury themselves. If they want to testify, they almost never agree to do that. But usually an outgrowth of that is for, the lawyers to say, but we'd like to come in and argue to you why the case shouldn't be brought. My guess is that that's probably much of what happened on Monday. So it shows you're at the near end, not at the absolute end, but nearly at the end of this portion of the investigation, I suspect.
You've already said that Donald Trump has disqualified himself to be president again. Do you think this is more fuel to the fire?
Well, sure. As I said, a number of times, being under indictment is not good for a political candidate. And the fact is that with this one, we'll see what the evidence turns out to be. But some of the reporting that I've read leads you to conclude that they have some very substantial evidence about his state of mind. And that's always one of the difficult things when you're prosecuting one of these cases.
Meaning he knew what he was doing was wrong and was afoul of the rules.
He knew that it sounds like they have evidence that he knew he had classified documents and that he wasn't permitted to show them to people. Well, that undercuts the argument he's made that everything was declassified as soon as he walked out the door because he said so. So there's some things there that are kind of interesting, and we'll see. I never like to make evaluations of this stuff, having done it for 7 years, to actually see the indictment and see what they have. But I'm certainly, if you're the former president and his lawyers right now, you're not going to be very happy about what's developing.
I've had Republican former Justice Department officials say to me that this is much worse than what Hillary Clinton did, and the theme of Donald Trump's convention in 2016 was lock her up. You prosecuted her from the stage there about all the things that allegedly she did wrong. This is worse.
Look, the classified documents that he had, that we now know he had, were things that should have never left the White House. And if he, in fact, knew that he had these documents, was looking at them, utilizing them in some way after he left office, and it looks like maybe even 2 years after he left office, it's a big problem.
So you're running for president. You just declared last night.
Yes, sir.
You're joining what's a pretty crowded field, surprisingly, considering there's a former president in it as well. Right now you're polling in the low single digits. I know you haven't even been in the race for a day. But in 2016 you ran. You placed 10th in Iowa, 6th in New Hampshire before getting out of the race. What is going to make this year different?
Well, the whole atmosphere is different, Jake. In 2015 and 16, when we ran the first time, you had a situation where Donald Trump had no record to speak of. He had been on a TV show, had been a private developer in New York. There was no way to really make the case against him. And I think all of us, myself, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, John Kasich, Ted Cruz, all found it very difficult to make the case because he could say whatever he wanted to say. There was no proof point to prove that he couldn't do it. So I'm going to build a wall across the entire border of Mexico, and Mexico is going to pay for it. Well, I didn't think he was going to be able to do that, physically figure out a way to do it. But how can you prove that he wouldn't? This is different. Today, we know he said he would build a wall across the entire border of Mexico. He didn't do it. About a quarter of the wall is built. He said Mexico would pay for it. We haven't gotten our first peso. And we know a lot of other things. Said he was going to repeal and replace Obamacare. He had a Republican Congress for 2 years, didn't get it done. Said he was going to balance the budget in 4 years, left with the greatest deficit of any president in modern history. Said he was going to get rid of the national debt in 8 years and left it trillions higher than when he walked in the door in just 4 years. There is a record here, Jake, on things both very, very significant on public policy, but even on the trivial. Remember, he used to go after Barack Obama for playing golf. And I remember standing on one of the debate stages one time, and he looked in the camera and said, I will not play golf a day because I'll be so busy fixing all of America's problems. And he wound up playing golf for 260 days. So on promises both big and small, he broke them. He disappointed our party. He disappointed the country. And that's going to be the focus of this campaign.
I have a lot more to ask you, but we're going to have to squeeze in a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And we're back with Republican presidential candidate and former New Jersey Governor Christie. So yesterday, Governor, when you announced that you were running for president, you called Trump, a former friend, a, quote, lonely, self-consumed, self-serving mirror hog. You've been rather unsparing in your criticism. We should note that you might have people out there who are skeptical of this because when you dropped out in 2016, you endorsed him.
Sure.
You ran his transition. You helped coach him for debates. What do you say to people who say, this guy has always been this way, you just enabled him, and now you're changing your mind?
Now, look, back in 2016, Jake, it was clear to me he was going to be the nominee. I had a long relationship with him at that time, over 15 years, and I thought I could help to make him a better candidate and a better president if he won. And I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president, and that's why I ran in the first place. Turned out I was wrong. I couldn't make him a better candidate, and I couldn't make him a better president. And he disappointed me. And he disappointed a lot of people in my party and a lot of people in this country by the way he performed. And for me, the breaking point was election night 2020, when he's out there at 2:30 in the morning claiming the election was stolen, when I knew he had no evidence to prove that. And when you undercut democracy in that way, you have forfeited the trust, in my view, to hold that office that he's now trying to regain. And so, yeah, I did all those things, and I make no apologies for them. But when I make a misjudgment, I'll admit it. And I thought I could make him better, and it wound up I couldn't. In fact, he was much worse.
So Trump, last night in response to you running, ran a rather mocking video on social media. There it is. It's you. I guess he's making fun of your weight. That's his. We're going to be small. That's his response. What did you make of that? What was your response to that?
When I saw Jake, I just renewed in my own mind what a child he is. He's a baby. Whenever you want to criticize him in any way, that's the way he responds. And you and I are both lucky enough to be parents. And if we had a child who conducted themselves like that, we'd send them to their room, not to the White House.
Yeah.
And I think character is destiny for this country. And we've got to make a decision about what the character of the person should be who sits behind the desk in the Oval Office. And if they're going to do that kind of stuff, I mean, it doesn't even, it's so childish. It's so juvenile. He is such a spoiled baby that, beyond that, what can you even say about something like that that's that ridiculous? If we want to break news here today, I've struggled with my weight for about 20 years, like tens of millions of Americans.
The devil, you say.
Right, exactly. So he's breaking news there. He's telling people something they don't know. In the end, for me, it's about how you perform as a person.
Yeah.
What kind of heart you have. And I'll put mine up against his any day in the week.
So on the subject of you admitting mistakes, you were pretty candid last night about some of those mistakes in your speech last night. I don't have time to play the excerpt, but one of the you talked about the Bridgegate scandal,
right?
And trusting people you shouldn't have trusted, and also do you admit setting a tone that those people thought that would be something that you would find acceptable?
Well, no, I didn't admit that, Jake.
I'm asking if you admit.
No,
that.
I don't. I didn't set that tone. And in fact, anybody who knew me and watched how I conducted myself as governor, I was very straightforward, direct, blunt at times. But I also did things regularly on a bipartisan basis. Working with Democrats, I had a Democratic legislature, as you know, for 8 years.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't do those kind of things and think that was consistent with the way I conducted myself as governor. I worked with the Senate President, the Speaker. We passed significant legislation, got hundreds of judges appointed to the bench.
Pension reform.
Yeah. Property tax cap. Things that people never thought could get done. That's not the tone.
Sorry to interrupt, but what lesson do you think you learned then?
That personnel is policy.
Yeah.
That you have to be even more careful, that there's no insignificant appointment, no insignificant hire, because that person acts in your name every day. And, when they're distant from you, like these folks were, physically distant from you, I think there's times when you can think, well, it'll be fine, and you don't see them every day. It was a mistake.
Yeah.
And they made a mistake in judgment, horrible mistake in judgment. They paid for it. But
it hurt you too.
So did I.
Yeah. Let's move on, because I know there's some issues that you want to talk about. Someone's that I'm really curious about. The PGA Tour, which had been hammering the Saudi government and LIV Golf for allying and being funded by the Saudi government because of 9/11, its human rights record, et cetera, et cetera. You have a lot of 9/11 families in New Jersey. PGA is now partnering with LIV Golf. What's your reaction to that?
I said this to you off air. I was stunned.
Yeah.
When I heard the news last night, I guess, after my town hall was over, I was absolutely stunned because all I've heard from the PGA is that they were morally, on principle, opposed to what was going on. But I guess Saudis came up with enough money to override the morality and the principle. And the people that I feel really badly for are the golfers themselves who stood with the PGA on that principle and would not go to LIV Golf, didn't accept 9-figure checks, and now are going to have to play with those same players again, with those players saying, hey, we're back with you and we've got the 9-figure check.
Right.
I mean, I think the PGA is going to have an enormous morale problem on that tour just for openers, and it's going to be interesting to see how they all try to manage it.
So Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has launched this vicious invasion of Ukraine, killing lots of civilians. As you know, two of your opponents have given some interesting signals on this. Donald Trump refused to say in the town hall with Caitlin Collins which side he wanted to win, Ukraine or Russia, refuses to call Vladimir Putin a war criminal, even though he has been indicted by The Hague. Ron DeSantis calls it a territorial dispute. Are they wrong? What's your position?
They're wrong. They're wrong. This is a proxy war with China. It's what it is. China is buying Russian oil like no one else in the world is doing. They're funding the murder of Ukrainians by the Russian army. President Xi goes to Russia, stands with Putin and says there is no limits to the Chinese friendship with the Russians. If you don't understand that this is a much bigger deal than just Ukrainian territory, it is a much bigger deal. Our friends around the world are going to see, do we stick? Do we stand with our friends? And do we give them the tools they need to protect themselves from authoritarian aggression? And I don't know what President Trump is thinking about this, except that he's been a puppet of Putin from the time he was president. And it always was disturbing to me. We would argue regularly about Vladimir Putin during the time that he was president. And I think it's very clear what we need to do. We need to give the Ukrainians every piece of military hardware they need to protect themselves against this aggression. And we need to continue to do it until they are ready to resolve the conflict with Russia.
So I have so many more questions, but we're out of time.
Oh.
But I will say, as you know, I've wanted you to come and answer questions for a long, long time, but you had a contract with ABC News.
Yes.
You no longer do.
I know I do not.
So come back soon, will you?
I will come back, absolutely, Jake.
All right. Best to Mary Pat. Really
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Best of luck out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you, Jake.
Coming up, Christie, we should note, is also going to participate in the CNN Republican Town Hall next Monday, live from New York, and Anderson Cooper will be the moderator of that one. That's coming up Monday night at 8 Eastern, only here on CNN. We're getting all these town halls. It's great.